I think recording throws up memorable moments mostly. So I began in 1960, and I was making a record with a group who were an instrumental group in the 60s, and this was, there were lots of groups who were like the Shadows, and some of them were good and some of them were not, but this particular group were really, really good. And believe it or not, they picked me up from school to go to the studio, and they were called the Hunters. A guy called Jack Baverstock looked at my bass drum. He said, "Hey, so you won't need that, son." I said, "Why?" He said, "Because we don't record bass drums here." I said, "Well, it's sort of part of what I do." And he said, "Well, what are you doing?" So I went, "Well, this is my..." I said, that's the feel I'm going to be playing." He said, "Oh, I see you need the bass drum then." I said, "Absolutely." So he said, "Okay." So that was the first time Fontana Studios had ever recorded a bass drum. The next thing that really happened is I went to school with a bunch of folk singers, and they really were, folk was big in 1963-4, and they had written a song which was called Concrete and Clay. The band were called Unit 4+2, and that sold 3 million records, and I was paid £5, 15 shillings and sixpence, which anybody in a foreign country, we can say is not very much. And we had a lot of great horn players, and we had, it was just a sublime band. And interestingly enough, Facebook seems to have discovered the GB Blues Company 40 years after the event. I looked out into the audience at a gig called the Torrington, which is no more, unfortunately, but it was where everybody played in Finchley. And I thought, that geezer looks like Ray Davies. Anyway, I didn't pay any further attention to it until afterwards. It was Ray Davies, and he walked over. And the thing about, there was a lot to play, because it was a proper band, and the horns had great arrangements, and I would play what they were playing when necessary. Anyway, Ray came over and said, "What are you up to?" I said, "Well, all this and that, Ray." I said, "Why?" He said, "Well, you want to make a record with us?" I said, I didn't say with us. He said, "With me. You want to make a record with me?" I said, "Yeah, of course." And I had done Dave Davis's 2 albums before that, but had never spoken to Ray on any subject at all. And I said, "Yeah, when?" So anyway, he said, it'll be next week. I said, "What about Mick?" And he said, "Oh, Mick's not doing this." I said, "Oh, okay." So I turned up, did the album, still was unsure about Mick, and somebody offered me a tour. I can't remember who it was, but I was offered a tour with somebody. So I got in touch with Ray. I said, "Ray, have you finished with me in the studio? Because somebody's offered me a tour." He said, "You can't tour with anybody else." He said, "You're in the Kinks." And that was how he told me. And I drove to the studio. He said, "Come to the studio and we'll have a chat." I drove to the studio and we went for a beer. And the next day we were rehearsing for an American tour. Now, if I hadn't phoned up to say, "What's going on? Do you still need me for recording?" I'm not sure when they would have told me that I was supposed to be going to America. So we rehearsed, and I made copious notes, as you do. And we went back the next day to do the final rehearsal, and there were different beginnings and different endings. I said, "Ray, we didn't do this yesterday." He said, "Oh, we don't always do the same beginning and the same ending." So that was when the penny dropped, and I knew that this was not going to be a drunken person's gig. You know, even in the end, I was having that much off a bottle of beer to go on, just to keep up with him. Because the thing about Ray is that while he would change the intro and the ending, if he wanted to, he would also change the middle. So and he might even do a song that we'd never played before, because it would slip his mind that I'd never played it. So it then became the most interesting gig I've ever had, because he would trust me to work out what was happening. It was what we aspired to. Everybody aspired to a Zildjian. And one of the other reasons is the mystique behind it. Ringo, who should definitely try out Avedis, because to me they sound like him. It's that sort of sound that we all had, because I can remember his sound because it was pretty well documented what he was doing. And so I think he would be, these would suit him to the ground. They're very tasteful. That's the word. They are very tasteful. I very nearly went. But certainly the hi-hats, they definitely do it. Effortless. So they get my vote, as they used to say on a television show.